Hello everybody. So today let's take a look at a couple of very simple techniques that we can use to help us a lot in dealing with SSH. So in my typical routine, I usually have to deal with 8 to 10 different Linux machines, and I manage them all by SSHing into them from my computer. So the problem in such a scenario is where you need to work with different machines through SSH at the same time is that it's very cumbersome to write the IP address of the machine you're SSHing into and do all the configuration that you might need and every other attribute that you might need to use. So, and also on top of all that, you also need to memorize all the IP addresses of the machines that you are dealing with. So this becomes kind of a problem when this is your daily job and something that you need to do on a daily basis or more frequently. So here's what you would do typically if you want to get into a remote machine, and you would do SSH, and then you would put in a username and you would do an @ sign, and here's an IP address that I have just for this demo, so I'll paste it in and I'll press enter, and this way you get into the machine. So this is fine. All right, this is fine as long as you're dealing with just a single machine and you remember the IP address and so on. Yeah, this would work. But the problem is, what if you have to deal with multiple machines at the same time, like you have more than a dozen? Or what if your job or your particular task requires you to switch between machines frequently? Like I did something here and now I need to exit out of here, and now I need to be in SSH into another machine. So again, I would be doing SSH, some user, some IP, blah, blah, blah. So this becomes kind of cumbersome, right? So in order to solve this issue, what we can do is we can use a config file that will help us a lot with this scenario. So here's the thing. Let me go ahead and show you. If you're on Windows, what you have is you'll have this .ssh directory. This .ssh directory is typically available on your C drive, and then you go to your users, and then whatever your user is, and then over there you will find a .ssh. So in this .ssh, by default, there's no config. There's no any file that says config or something like that. So you will need to add a config file to this root directory of the .ssh service. All right, so if you're on Linux, on Mac, or whatever, so just make sure that you add the config file that we're about to do into the root directory of your SSH. Otherwise, it will not be, your SSH service will probably not be able to interpret that and pick that up. And another important thing about the config file is it has to be named config, C-O-N-F-I-G, config. And another important thing is that it has to be extensionless. So at first you might be tempted to do something like click here and go to new, and then from there, from new, you would probably be able to try to create the config file from here. But then what is it? Is it a text document, rich text? No, it's none of these. So it's none of these. How do you create the config in here then that has no extension? Well, the easiest way, or the way that I like to do it, is to do it through terminal, which is really easy. So we are going to head back to our terminal, and then we're going to create the config file that we need. So let's go back to the terminal. I'm going to use Vim. Vim is a terminal-based editor, so I'm going to use Vim to create the file. You can use Nano, you can use any other editor that you like. So of course I first need to be on this directory, which it seems that I'm already on my user, so I just need to do cd and then a .ssh. And once I'm in the directory, I can simply then go ahead and do Vim and then name of the file. Remember, it has to be config. This has to be name of the file. You press enter. So this way it will create the file. So see, this is now a new file. Of course, I can go ahead and start typing here and add stuff, whatever I need. But for the sake of this tutorial, since Vim is kind of tricky to work with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply save the file and have it created this way, and then I'm going to actually open the file, and my favorite text editor that I use for my work, which is VS Code. You can go ahead and use any one that you like. And then we are going to work with the config file from VS Code. So I'll press escape. And once you're here, you're gonna do a colon, a W, and a Q. W stands for write and Q for quit. So it says write and quit. And if I do an ls now, I list out stuff. So you see now I have config at this directory, right? So now I'm going to open the file, the config file in my VS Code. So the easiest way to do is to simply type in code and then name of the file. So this will actually open config file in VS Code. Otherwise, you can obviously simply go ahead and you see now we have a config in here. You can come in here and you can simply do open with VS Code. All right, so let's just do it from here. So let me press enter and let's wait. All right, so now we have our config file. So the first thing that I would like to show you is you can leave comments in here. Of course, you can go ahead and you can do a hash sign and then you can write whatever you want. So this is a comment. So let's just do that for example. Other than that, you start with a key value pairs configuration settings, if that's what you like to call it. The important one, which is host. Now this is the key. It has to be like this. It has to say host, H-O-S-T, and then you put in a space and then you put in whatever you want. So let's pretend that we're working with a production server. So let's do something like prod, maybe prod and server. So this could be anything. You can write prod server, you can write ABC, you can write any gibberish you like. So this could be anything, it doesn't matter. So this will be our host. So we put in host prod server, then you come to the next line. And I'm not really sure if you need to do a tab over here or not, but I like to do tabs because it makes things really decluttered and improves the readability a lot. So you would do typically you would do a tab, and then the next thing that we need to do is host name, and then again there's no equal, there's equal sign, no nothing, just a simple space, and then you would put in what your host name is, in this case your IP address. So let me copy over my IP address here, and I'm sorry, I've got to copy it from all right, so we have it here, right here. So let's copy it and let's come here and put it in here. All right, so this would be my host name. On the next line, I need to specify the port. What port am I trying to connect on, or this host name? So I would do port 22, which is the default port. Of course, if yours is different, you would put your port, whatever it is. The third key is to put in user. Who are you trying to log in as or access the remote machine as? So in this case, we would like to access the remote machine as root. And the last important piece of information is identity file. All right, so you need to put in an identity file. An identity file is what authenticates you. So in this case, you need to put a reference to your private key. So in this case, let's take a look at what our private key is. So I'll come here, and here you can see this is the file that holds my private key. In this case, it says id_ed25519. You might be using RSA, so that doesn't matter. If you're using RSA, that's fine too. Whatever you're using, so you just need to put in the reference to the private key. That is important, not the public key, the private key. All right, so I'll come back here and I'll put in the reference for my private key that will authenticate the user root over this port in this host. All right, so let's put in a tilde. That is just basically telling the root, and then let's put on the .ssh, which is the directory where we are at, and then let's put on the name of the public key file, so which is id_ed25519, and we are done. So this is basically it. We save this file and that's it. So let's now go ahead and head over back to our terminal and see how this can help us. All right, so actually my terminal is here. So where is my terminal? All right, so here it is. So remember what we did before. We did SSH and then we did root and then add and then the IP address. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to do SSH and I'm going to do a prod server. And I'm going to press enter. So it's going to log me in, of course, just like it's supposed to. So it did. So what actually happened? So this prod server, this thing, needs to match this host. That's it. So behind the scene from this config, it picked up this IP address, it picked up this port, it picked up this root as a user, and it picked up this identity file. And everything is just taken care of behind the scene. All right. So this way you can really simplify the process. So you don't have to keep track of what IPs you're dealing with, what ports you're dealing with, who the user is, where your identity file might be at, wherever it is. So you don't have to keep track of anything at all. All you need to remember is this word right here, and you simply type in this word after the word SSH on your terminal and you are in. That's it. Isn't it great? Of course it is. So in this case, what you would do in case you have multiple machines, of course, you're simply gonna have to copy this and then replicate it as many times as you need it. So for example, in this case, I might have 1, 2, 3, 4 machines, or as many as I want. So the IP would be different, the ports might be different, or I can even have you know, 2 configurations for 2 different users. So the IP and port and everything is the same, but the user and the identity file might be different. So I could go ahead and perhaps do something like prod server root, and then over here I would do prod server maybe Bob, so for user Bob or something like that. So I can create the configuration settings over here any way I want for any number of machines I want. So all I will need to do is I will then simply need to use this name to log into the machine that I want to actually. And let's go ahead and try to how we might even be able to improve this even further. So I'm going to bring this back to its original shape. So let's come here and take a look at what we can do to actually make it even much better more. All right, so let's exit out of here. Remember right now what we need to do something like SSH and then prod server. This is what we need to do. All right, so what we can do is this could also sometimes, if you have really like a large number of machines, like more than a dozen machines and like more than a dozen configuration settings, then even this might become a little bit difficult to keep track of and remember what host names you have chosen, what host names you have, and etc. So of course, one thing that you can always do is, since you're already on the .ssh folder, so one thing you can always do is you can simply cat out the config file on the screen and then have a quick look to find what you're looking for. So what you would do is you would do cat and you would do config. Because obviously config is already again, remember, available on this path. So you would cat it out and this will print the content of the file on your terminal, and then you can go ahead and look through what you need. So that is one way. The other way is we can improve this further by introducing some aliases. So of course what I can do is I can go ahead and create an alias, and to create an alias you really need to put in the word alias, and then you would put in anything you want, anything that's meaningful to you. So let's do a short version of the prod server, actually the SSH prod server. So I would do an SPS, short for SSH prod server, and then you put in an equal sign, and then you put in the actual command that you want to run as this alias. So I would do SSH prod server. And remember, if you are on Linux, you actually have to put in double quotes. You have to do this because we have this space over here. Right here we have a space, so you have to enclose this whole thing in double quotes, but for some reason it's not required on Commander. I'm using this Commander terminal on Windows, so I'm going to remove these and I'm going to simply press enter. So now I have set an alias. So instead of doing SSH prod server, what I can do is I can simply do SPS and I press enter. And wait a minute, let's see what it can do. All right, I'm logged in. That's it. So you see how much we improved the process of getting into our remote machines. First, from using ports and users and IP addresses, we improved that by defining a simple hostname and our config file. And then secondly, we improved that even more by defining an even shorter version in the form of an alias. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something from it. So if you have any questions, you can leave your questions down below in the comment sections, and I will be answering your questions for you. Thank you.